Hey guys and girls, so this is my first time doing one of these videos and I'm going to start with a top 10 list of my favourite villains from cartoons and comics. So I'm going to start off with not just one villain but the group known as Venom from the Mask cartoon series. Venom is an organisation of criminals with special powered helmets and vehicles. And they battled Mask, which were also a secret organisation but of heroes who also had special powered helmets and vehicles. The reason why I didn't want to pick on just one of the guys and choose the whole group is because they generally worked as a group. Each one had a role to do and you couldn't really pick one over the other. Each helmet had a special ability which would do something that they needed, and each vehicle also had its own special abilities. At number 9 I've got Magneto from the X-Men. Why was a mutant with the ability to control metal such a great formidable foe for such an exceptional group of heroes? To start with, he used to be friends with the leader of the X-Men, Professor Xavier, but more the point, you need to look at who he was fighting against. The main members of the X-Men that fought against Magneto over the times would have been Professor Xavier, who was a telepath, or was a man who was bound to a metallic wheelchair. Obviously, anytime he was around, Magneto would have he'd be able to move him out of the way. Second of all, Xavier's telepathy could not penetrate Magneto's helmet. He had it specially made so that telepaths couldn't get in his mind. Another member, also a telepath, Jean Grey, so once again couldn't get into his head. She did have telekinesis, so she could move things, but if she moved something metallic, he would obviously move it out of the way himself. One of the greatest X-Men, or favourites of the viewers or readers, is Wolverine, but he consisted of a metallic alloy called adamantium, sorry, my bad, that was encasing his whole skeleton and even his claws that he's renowned for. So he was useless against Magneto. Colossus, the giant metal skin powerhouse, once again, man made of metal, has no effect on a guy who is magnetic. And finally, the leader of the X-Men, well, generally left in control of the X-Men even though Xavier was the top guy, was Cyclops. His ability was lasers to come out of his eyes, but he generally used a metallic visor to control it so it wasn't just constantly shooting everywhere. So when you're using something metallic to control your ability, obviously the magnetic evil villain is going to be able to have his way with you. Next on the list is a DC villain. As you can probably tell from the hat, I'm more of a Marvel fan. I wouldn't say I'm a fanboy because I do like DC in part. I'm not saying that I don't like DC as much as Marvel or anything like that, just I do prefer Marvel. I figure they have better characters, better storylines, and when it comes to the cinematic universe, they're so far ahead of DC at the moment. So at number 8 we have Lex Luthor. He's a normal man, but a genius, a crazy genius, an evil genius. I fear the reason I like him so much is the fact that he is just a normal man. Out of all the villains that Superman has to encounter, the one that gives him the most trouble is a man without any abilities. You know, he didn't have superpowers. He did have a suit at one stage, a powered suit that gave him abilities, but basically he was just a normal man. At number 7, once again, a crazy genius, I've got Norman Osborn. Most people would know him as the Green Goblin, one of Spider-Man's main villains, but if you look over the history of Marvel, he's actually had a lot more than just the Green Goblin. At one stage he was the leader of the Thunderbolts, which was supposed to be a group of rehabilitated criminals, but Norman was using them in the shadows to do his own dirty work. While in charge of the Thunderbolts, he found out how to kill the Skrull Queen when the invasion had happened, and by taking the kill shot and killing her off, he became a hero in the eyes of the public, apparently. By doing this, Norman Osborn then took over as the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., which he had disbanded and replaced with his own group, Hammer. And as part of that, he was given all the things that came with S.H.I.E.L.D. And prior to this, Nick Fury was no longer in control, and Iron Man was actually in control of S.H.I.E.L.D. and had blurred the lines between Stark and S.H.I.E.L.D. and inadvertently had all his armour, his suits of armour, properties of S.H.I.E.L.D. So Norman Osborn got that, and by re-engineering or reverse engineering from Tony's suits, he made his own suit and became the Iron Patriot. And with this, he also invented his Dark Avengers. Apparently trying to be heroes, but always having ulterior motives to help Norman Osborn out. At 6, I've put Skeletor. Now, a guy that, muscle-bound freak by the looks of him, with a skull face, it's funny, it's comical. The fact that he was always so confident in everything he planned and never succeeding, and always a utter crybaby, but you just fall in love with him. For a bad guy, he just becomes a lovable character. At number 5, I've got the Venom symbiote from Spider-Man. Ultimately, I would say one of Spidey's greatest villains. About the only one that was on par with Spider-Man, because they had similar abilities from when it was attached to Spider-Man. And over the time, the symbiote has changed hands, being the fact that it wasn't a pure bond, it was always able to change to another person. And with this came heaps of different challenges and mixes. We know that Venom started off with Eddie Brock, and so was hell-bent on revenge, and that's what really drove Venom in the early days. But later reiterations such as Mac Gargan, who was Scorpion and became this huge behemoth of a Venom, that was really cool to see. The fact he used to feast on bad guys when he was part of the Dark Avengers. They used to feed him people and to keep him happy and sedated. And then later on, the Venom symbiote was passed on to Flash Thompson, who had been a school rival of Peter's and became a star quarterback for the college. And later on he went to war and he returned an injured soldier. He was given the symbiote and actually was used as a Black Ops hero as Venom, rather than being an evil criminal. At number 4, once again another crybaby, confident as but never succeeding, I've got Cobra Commander. I could have said the whole Cobra organization, as I did with Venom, but I picked Cobra Commander because I just fell in love with this character when watching the cartoons. Even reading comics, you just fall in love with this character. He's so hell-bent on taking over the world or destroying G.I. Joe or anything like that, but he always fails. He's always crying and making excuses. His right-hand man Destro was also awesome, but he was always in Cobra Commander's shadow. At number 3, I've got Loki. Now, if you know me, you're going to know, Loki had to be on the list somewhere. I love the fact in the comics, in cartoons, in the movies, he starts off with one thing. He just wants to be the king of Asgard, and so starts this rivalry with his stepbrother. As brotherly rivalries go, like, this was just the epitome of rivalries. He's such a cool character, the way, he uses magic, and he's mischievous like the Norse god that he's based on. And just the things he does and how he went from purely being against Thor to later on becoming an enemy of the Avengers. And he just goes on, always has this new way of doing things, and every plan he has is so much worse than the last one, and sometimes he doesn't think them through, like the time he tried to pull the Hulk out of Bruce Banner, and all of a sudden there was just this unleashed monster of rage running around. At number 2, I'm more a Transformers fan than I am a Marvel fan, so Megatron / Galvatron's number 2 on the list. I got both Megatron and Galvatron because technically they are the same person, or same character. He was Megatron in the early days against Optimus Prime, where they were just pure polar opposites and they just worked so well as enemies. You had Megatron just hell-bent on, didn't care what he destroyed, take over Earth just to get resources so he could retake Cybertron. And then you had Optimus, who was all about protecting life, whether it was Transformer or human or whatever type of life. Then later on, when Unicron turned him into Galvatron, came back again. This time he seemed a bit more, sort of more focused, and almost had like an air of like knowledge and experience, and so that made him now a great polar opposite to Rodimus Prime, who was considered to be young Transformer, very hot-headed, and everything he did, you could sort of tell he was a junior figure, although he was in control because he was the new Prime. Galvatron, once again, like Megatron, didn't care what he did as long as he got his way, but just seemed the prime opposite to the person in charge of the Autobots. And last on the list, I've got the Joker, which probably comes as no surprise. The evil, crazy, caught up in his game character that's so fun to read and fun to watch, and as I've found, just fun to even cosplay. The Joker is definitely Batman's best villain, and in my opinion DC's best villain. Everything he does, it seems so well planned, yet he's, as he said in the movies, he's not the sort of guy to have a plan. He's just, the way he goes about things, he doesn't really care about who he hurts, but it's not so much about like taking over the world or destroying his opponent. He sees what he does with Batman as a game, and it's his job to create chaos, and it's Batman's job to try and come save the world, or save Gotham. The more you read this character, the more you love him, the more you want him to be the main villain, but obviously it'd probably get a bit tired if you only had one villain. So DC has created all these great villains for Batman, and the Joker has at times turned on them because he sees him as Batman's only rival. And that's my top 10 villains. Hopefully you tune in again next video I do. And I may even start uploading some cosplay videos when I do them. Enjoy!